Yeah. Okay. Get this going. Hello, hello, hello. Yes. Yeah. No, we left the last time we left it with consuming obviously. Today it's gonna be similar to it, a little bit of because every time I come up here, it's always always something on my mind, So no. Yeah, difficulties there, so I had that type of experience. Like I'm like, okay, it's getting a little bit more like trickier for me because and they're trying to get me into the to the Christian world, so but things they're saying, it doesn't really make me feel like wants to be in that world again, because when I used to be a child, I used to listen to those type of doctrine. I used to fall asleep, and my mate invited me to a conference, in the church they go to every day, and as we driving, to the church, where he invited me to, and one of the churches I used to go also, my family go in those churches still today as well, so I'm like, okay, let me just go there, I might see a few familiar faces, and yeah, let's see how it goes. While we're going over there, so we're talking about food and and me, obviously after those encounter with those two parties, the father and the son, and so I went back home. I just trying to read a little bit of the Bible and anything like that, but I didn't go as far like everybody else, because people enjoy the Bible, because the Bible is it's a beautiful type of a vibe, it's very everything is so beautiful, things appear, disappear, and and it was bad things, and then things happens because you have to follow a certain way and live certain way, and so it's just if you really want to kind of be in that world, so you're gonna enjoy the Bible, because it has so many beautiful things in there, so so that's how people really into those type of books, so they're hooked, because it feels more safe than the world that was presented to them, today, we have to pay bills, and someone might rob you somewhere, so but when you read the Bible, it's you're not even in that world, but it used to be a different world, so now you read it so you can apply it in the world that you're living in, so you can go to a different world that's gonna be better than this one right now, So as we were driving, I asked him, he was talking about the food, part, and so I'm like, yo man, in the beginning of Genesis, they're talking about us eating certain food, and he's agree with me, it's yeah, we were vegan, we were more planetarian, we were eating plants, and later on when Jesus came, he offered them for them to start eating certain different food, but he agreed with me, in the beginning of it, people were more healthier, right? People were eating different food, and that's God's word, that was given to the people back then, for them to eat certain food, in the beginning of the world that was created for them, so I was like, okay, so should we not continue doing it? Because nowadays, everybody's on certain illness, so the illness is going really off the roof nowadays, people changing from the food that they used to eat before. Now they're eating certain different food, people have more illnesses than before, back then. So then he started going on, yeah, this and that, even like, so they always like agree with you, you know, if you say certain things like, you know, that's actually like, it's not, you know, even though they agree with you, you know, but they're still gonna go back home like and eat the same food, like, you know, that's represent to them, like, you know, in their everyday life, like, you know, so they're still gonna go home and like, you know, it's not like they're gonna be like, yeah, I agree with you, like, yeah, I should stop today, you know, no, like, you know, no, they're gonna go back and start eating the way, you know, their everyday lifestyle, like, you know. So we got into the church, you know, and the church was there, and they had like barbecue outside, like, you know, so they had like an international function, you know. And the culture, you know, everybody's talking about the culture nowadays also. And you had like different cultures, European culture and African culture, and you know, so I'm walking around, like, you know, I'm seeing everybody with the food, like, you know, so no green food, man. So even though it's in the Bible, like, you know, like seeds, nuts, you know, the green food, the vegetables, you know, the herbs, the healing, you know, none of that was chicken, rice, beans, potatoes, and then the other section that you have like cakes, and then the other person that you have like cakes, and the other person like bread and all, like I see no green, like. So I was like, okay, like, you know, what's going on really, like, you know. You know, are we like really like taking things like on board, like, you know, what's this being written like in the Bible, like, and are we really like following the doctrine like the way it's written, or are we just like, you know, reading certain things like just to make ourselves like feel good like in a certain area, like, you know. So I'm like, oh, this is strange, because, you know, at the beginning of Genesis, like, you know, God has provided, like, you know, the food that they should be eating, like, you know, their everyday, like for everyday, their lifestyle, like this is how you should be, you know, going on about, this is how you're gonna understand me, like, you know, if you eat certain food, like, you know, this is how it goes, you know. But when I went to the function, like, you know, nobody has like any green in there, like, you know, and then they call it the culture, and then all the food, like, it's just similar. You got chicken over there, but just different made, and maybe seasoned a little bit different. You know, you got potatoes over there, just seasoned a little bit different. You got like meat over there, like just seasoned a little bit different, and then they call it a different name. Like, you know, but everybody had the same food, like, and then everybody have a different flag, like, you know, coming from a different area and different country. So I'm like, yeah, but like, you know, this is kind of strange, you know. And then one of the I don't know if it was actually somebody that I met actually in town also, you know, and he was in the church, you know, he was going to the same church. And one of my colleagues actually invited me to those functions, like, you know. So I'm like, okay, and I seen the person there also, but previously we had a conversation in town. And he stopped me, like, he said, yo man, you should give your life to Jesus Christ, like, you know. So he talked, you know, give your life to Jesus Christ, something is coming down, and this year, you know, we're in the time where, you know, it's just like judgment day, like, you know, something like, you know. So I'm just looking, I'm like, okay, you know, so I asked him, like, you know, like, do you know anything about like genetics, you know? And he himself, like, he's a doctor also. He's a doctor, knows, you know, certain body parts, you know, certain, like, you know, biology, names, you know, like. So I asked him, like, you know, do you know anything about genetics? He's like, yeah, I'm a doctor, like, you know, I work in the clinic, like, you know. So I'm like, so you do know? So I'm like, look, what were we eating, like, you know, back then, like, because in the Bible says, like, you know, the creator gave us like the food that we're supposed to eat, which I name all those names, in the page, I presented to him, like, it's like, yeah, back then we used to eat like this, but Jesus came and then he gave us a different salvation, and now, like, we follow his doctrine, like, so like, but why wouldn't like, change everything, like, after the man himself, like the man, whoever, like, the creator himself, like, gave you certain, like, certain recommendation, like, for you to follow, like, so you can't just like stop that because he brought somebody down, like, for and as he like, the person who came down, whatever, like, but the person who he selected, or God selected, and now, like, he changed your people's diet, like, and since he's changed the diet, like, diabetes, like, went up, sickness went up, illnesses went up, and people have more trouble eating food than back then. And one of his colleagues was there, he actually agreed with me, like, yeah, back then we were vegan, we felt a little bit more better, now, like, it's a little bit of change. We we made ourselves, like, eating differently, like, so I'm like, oh, like, are you guys hearing, like, what I'm trying to say? Like, I'm just saying, like, the people were eating before that, they were eating more healthier, back then. The food didn't taste like the way it tastes today, like, but like the guy used to, eating certain food, like, because it's in their genetics, like, and it favors them because it's in their genetics, like, that's how God created them, like, to be a certain way, to behave certain way, and eat certain way also, so then it can favor them, like, in the world they live into, even in their environment also, and it's like, no, Jesus came and he gave us a new way of life, like, and I'm like, yeah, but like, have you not noticed, like, diabetic went up, illnesses went up, dementia went up, Parkinson's disease went up, and people don't get enough, like, nutrition in their body, like, so they're eating different things, like, into their body, and it started becoming like they putting things in their body, like, as like foreigner DNA, so it's like, yeah, but like, we should, like, we should, like, just give you, to Jesus Christ, like, he will solve everything, like, so I'm like, okay, cool, and then the same day, not the same day, maybe the same week also, I'm still in the same town, and then one guy comes in, like, he owns like a kebab shop, like, and he's from the Islamic, like, world, like, he's Muslim, he follows the Muslim way, and he came down, like, he knows the person that owns he knows the person, like, that works in that shop over there, like, because it's a phone shop, like, so I used to go see one of my friends, like, in there, like, I just be sitting there or maybe standing over there and just be talking about certain things, like, so, and then the guy always comes down there to get his phone fixed all the time, like, so he was there, and he was there from Islam, like, and he's like, yo, I have a shop over there, if you want to eat, like, like, come and eat in my shop, like, good discount, like, kebab and everything like that. And I'm like, do you have vegan food over there? I have vegetarian, like, okay. Okay, but I'm vegan, like, I don't eat, like, meat or pork, anything like that, oh, my friend, you should eat, like, it's good to eat meat, like, and everything like that, like, and he asked me that I'm a Christian. I'm like, no, are you Muslim? I'm like, no, you know. And it's like, why you not the religions, like, you know? And all of a sudden, like, you know, I'm asking, like, you know, the conversation start getting a little bit more like, you know, about Islam, you know, and you know, and before that, like, I used to, you know, read Islamic books as well, like, you know, the Muhammad, you know, the Quran. And while I was reading the Quran, you know, I felt like the Quran was so extreme to me, like I couldn't even like finish the book, like so military, like, you know, mind, like way, like, you know, lifestyle, like, you know, like there's always like, you know, somebody's coming to get you, or, you know, you shouldn't trust certain like group of people, like, you know, and those people like deserve to, you know, yeah, you know, should be erased from the human race, like, you know, there should be like, if they don't follow, like, you know, Muhammad, like, you know, they should be gone, like, you know. So I'm like, this is very, like, this is on some different shit, like, this is not like something like that's like hugging, friendship, brotherhood, or anything like that. This is just like, you know, with the program. You got to go, bro, man, you know. So I'm like, bro, how can they like do this, like, you know? And then I brought this up, like, you know, in the conversation, like, you know, with the brother, like, you know, who owns the food shop. It's like, yeah, but like, you know, in this world, there's always gonna be problems, like, you know. And I'm like, bro, like, but, you know, how can you have a doctrine that brought you in this world, like, you know, for you to have like problems that cannot be solved, like, you know? So like, why, like, you know, why would you still be on the program, like, you know, if you know like somebody is like, you know, it's not gonna solve any, like, you know, giving you a lot of problems, like, you know, cannot be solved, like, it's like, yeah, but that's how life is, you know. Allah put like a lot of problems for us, you know, and we try to solve it, but it will never be solved. I was like, fuck. Excuse my language, but like, I was like, well, you know, like, man, you know, this is a little bit crazy, because, you know, you have somebody who created, like, you know, their world, like, you know, and not even like encoded like in their mind, like, you know, how to solve any problems, like, you know. So how can you hang around with certain people, like, you know, who never gonna solve any problems, like, you know, because they know, like, you know, the God that created their world, like, you know, with problems all the time, like, you know. So you cannot ever solve any problems at all, like, you know. So I'm like, man, this is a little bit extreme, man. This is too extreme for me, like, you know, I cannot be like, yeah, you know. So then it just brought me back, like, you know, it was like, you know, and then me sitting down with the brother, like, you know, and we having this like, you know, conversation about, like, you know, spirituality, like, you know, where they talk about like getting close to certain like entity, you know, and a different realm and a different world, like, you know, and I'm asking, like, you know, I'm like, yeah, so how do you, like, you know, tap in, like, to this, like, you know, spiritual world, like, you know. And he's like, yes, like, so how'd you do it, like, you know, because I know, you know, most of the people that I watch, like, you know, always talking about like spirituality, like, they're always like high, you know, they're always like on drugs, you know, like like weed. You see them like their hair is always long. They have like dreadlocks. You know, they're sitting there like, you know, and they're talking about like, you know, people invade, who came down and took like, you know, it's like this, like it's just crazy, like, you know, like you smoke weed, like, you know, so maybe it's just like they just want to smoke weed and feel like, you know, like, you know, life is like, you know, worth living, like, you know, they just want to smoke weed and just escape like certain like yeah, my brothers just want to smoke weed, like, you know, just, you know, escape just certain problems, like, you know, because when you smoke weed, like, you know, you don't really like think about any problem, like you think about like you have a problem, but it can never be fixed, like, you know, so you just want to escape that problem like all the time by smoking weed, like, you know. So once you just smoke the weed, like you step away from like the world that you're actually in, and then you're in a different world, like, you know. So your brain is telling you like, okay, this world is like a lot of problems, like, you know, so I cannot be fixed that type of problem, like, you know, so let me just smoke weed, like, you know, and go to a different world, like, you know, and tell people like this is like spirituality, like, you know, you can tap in, like, you know, whatever you want, like, nobody taking certain, like, you know, medicinal, like, you know. So I asked him, like, you know, so how did you like know, like, you know, that, you know, there's like you know, your antibodies or something like that, you left your body here and then your spirit just left your body, like, you know, so you can go and tap into a different world, like, you know. And he goes to me like, you know, like, yeah, he was taking some mushrooms, like, and some medicinal shit, like, I'm like, yeah, like I said, like you were just drug addicts, like, you know. You know, at first he was like, no man, you can just do it like that by sleeping, like, you know, sleeping paralysis or some shit like that, like, you know. I'm like, bro, like, your brain, like, he goes like, your brain stops. I'm like, how can your brain just stop, like, you know? Nah man, bro, your brain has to work 24/7. Your body works 24/7. Like, how can just your brain just stop and then you're dead? Like, we just have to understand, like, things that we say, like, you know, like, we try to make it like so scientifically like cool, like, you know, but it just looks goofy, like, we just sound very goofy, like, you know. Like, what would, like I don't understand this thing, like, sometimes, like, you know, like, there's people who wants to be like spiritually, they take like drugs, ayahuasca, they go to ayahuasca, they take like a lot of like, you know, substance, like, you know, in their body, like, you know, and then they come back, like, you know, into the world and telling people, like, you know, how to live their life, like, you know. And then you see them like on live, like, you know, smoking weed, like oh, some of the podcasts, like, you know, like, and they're telling them like, look man, you know, I was tripping on mushrooms. Now I'm here, like, you know, to tell everybody, like, you know, you can tap into a different world, like, you know, escape the problems that you have here over here, like. So you have Islamic, you know, they're reading the book, like, you know, like, they're always gonna have problems all the time. So that means like they're always gonna have like enemies, like, you know. So that's the reason why it's so military, like, you know, so it's always gonna be like somebody who's gonna try to, you know, so it cannot be solved, like, you know. So the only way I can solve it is, like, you know, but just get rid, like, and in the Christian world, like, you know, this is even more crazier because I read it like from the beginning, and only I stopped it like around like Abel and Cain, and like only got to that, like the other part, like I don't even know like what's really going on there. So you have like Adam and Eve, like, you know, they obeyed, like, you know, and they went against God, like, and now they got like 2 children who would then murder each other. Like, one of them murder one of them, and then you get like it's just, like sometimes I can't even like explain the situation like to anybody, like, but even though I had this conversation with somebody like that close to me, like a friend, I'm like, yo bro, man, like, you got 2 sinners who made love, like, and their genetics, like, goes further, and those 2 children, like, as you can, like, you're reading it, like, you see like 2 people who went against God, and then they made children who then had a mindset of being like jealous to another person and murdered, like, so you have like people who went against God and then they become sinners, and then now they got 2 children who then start sinning in some type of way, and then one of them is like, how did Canaan even like get to make children, like, So I just stopped from there, like, I just like, nah. It's getting really like creepy right now, like, for me anyway, like, but for others, like, keep, they're arguing with me about certain things, like, and then they agree with me as well, and then they say like it was okay, like, back then to do it, like it's okay to do it today too, because it's the word of the Bible, like, it's the word of God, like, so your God is like, okay with the things, like so I'm like, okay, cool, So once you have like certain like sinners, like, so those people are always gonna be problems all the time, like, and those problems cannot be fixed because, and then you have the Quran, the Islamic, they're telling me like, Allah put like a lot of problems over here, like, so we cannot be fixed. Any problems like that's in this world, like, cannot be fixed. And you can see like this, like similar things, like, you got the, the sinners who cannot be fixed. They're always gonna develop new sinners all the time. And then even that, like, God even chose those sinners to be the people who can control the world that, that's existing right now today. The Jewish community. Which I didn't even ask the person, like, who told me, like, he's like, yeah man, the people, Adam and Eve were Jewish, like, So now in their world, like, in the Christian world, like, they have like, God chose those sinners, to be the chosen people, like, and then in the Quran, you have the people, they're always gonna have problems all the time. That God created so many problems that they cannot be fixed, but just follow the doctrine. So in the judgment day, because, then I can guide you to heaven, like, So problems cannot be solved, like. And then you have the spiritual people, like, here, they're in medicinal, taking drugs, like, like it's okay. And then they come out here, like, telling other people, like, to do the same thing, like, And I see everybody just like narcotics, like, because they listen to some people like, you know, who like famous, you know, they went to one last guy and all that kind of goofy shit, like, you know, they're coming down like to tell you guys like, yeah, you know, yeah, you know, I did some mushrooms, like, you know, and I went to a different world, like, you know, and those kids right here right now, like, you know, because of the parents always complain about, like, you know, how hard life is, like, you know, so they're always trying to escape that type of life all the time. You know, you have people like, you know, making life for them like very difficult, you know, and so they hear somebody like is very famous, like, you know, for them, yeah man, let me just follow his footsteps, like, you know, and the person, you know, who looks very good also is wearing glasses, you know, wearing a suit and all that, like, you know, he's in a Nike deals or something like that, like, but he's telling this generation, like, you know, to go and take like drugs, like, for them to escape like this world that he looks good at, like. So he looks good. He's telling the youngsters, like, if you want to be in this situation, like, you know, you need to take certain things, like, you know, for you to escape that world, like, you know, like the something like certain like poverty, like, you know, get away from that poverty, like, you know, so that poverty, you know, for you to be in this world, like, you know, that's more cooler, you know, so you have to take certain like drugs, like, you know, for you to embrace this new way of life, like, you know, which is like spiritual world, like, you know, you feel invisible. So all these worries, like, you know, that you know, that you're in your everyday life, like, you know, for you to solve, like, you know, and even though like those problems, like, you know, that people like tend to run away from, like, you know, it's not even that deep. You just don't want to do it because you're addicted to certain things, like, you know, that you like it. Just say you like smoking weed, like, you know, just say like you like taking like drugs, like, just say you just like to take all those like medicinal mushrooms, like, you know, just say it, like, it's easier. But when you come out there, like, you know, you're trying to make it like so intelligent, like, you know, for you to take certain substance, like, so you can go and, you know, travel the world, like, you know, with your brain, like, you know, but your brain is dead, but your body leaves your, like, you look like, I don't know, bro. You look goofy, bro, man. And people that oh man, and people, yeah, they tend to be like very like intelligent, like, you know, talking on the screen, and they say all these big words, like, you know, and usually, like, you know, when you say certain things, like, you know, and there's always an action, like, you know, and when you say certain things and then you act on it, you know, and your lifestyle should get better and better and better all the time, like, you know, but so those intelligent words that they're speaking on, like, you know, it's just by them saying, like, you know, I know little, you know, but the public, like, you know, because they find everything so cool, like, you know, everybody's just going out there and just speaking, like, you know, like, everything is so, like, you know, like, intelligently, like, you know, you're trying to make everybody like, yeah, you know, and everybody reading the same book, you know, and you have to, like, I always like look at things like that, right? If let's say you have like a generation, like, you know, and they were talking about certain things, like, you know, back in the days, and there was like a group of people, like, you know, and they joined that kind of community, and then that community is thriving, it's getting better, and people getting like, you know, getting like to solve like certain problems, like, you know, on the way to a change, you know. I would actually join that group, like, you know, I'd be like, okay, what you guys do, like, you know, how you guys like getting away from this, you know, type of like, you know, trauma, whatever it is, like, you know. So, and you have like people like, you know, like, let's do this, let's eat a certain way, or maybe dress a certain way, and, you know, and we write a book about it, like, you know, and people reading the book, like, you know, and then all of a sudden, like, people are actually like thriving also, like, you know, and life is getting better and better and better, and they're making kids who's like more friendlier, more, you know, the acceptance of life, like, you know, they feel like, you know, this life is actually like worth living, like, you know. But when you're reading like things like, you know, it's not worth living, and you're just trying to escape, like, you know, and saying that, you know, you need to stay away from, like, you know, your problems, and then you know, like, basically they're saying like just step away from your experience, and then just, you know, forget everything, like, you know, just come up here, like, you know, take weed and drugs, like, you know, so you can be like better, like, you know. That's just goofy shit, man, you know. But in this community over here, you know, they take their time, like, you know, develop, like, you know, certain communities, you know, okay, this thing is working for us, like, you know, let's just keep doing this, and, you know, people getting healthier and healthier, people eating different now, and then all of a sudden they have like a bond now, like, you know, and people are thriving, like, you know, and feeling good also, like. But when you have like goofballs like talking about like taking drugs and, you know, just say, like, you know, it's not wrong with it, like, you know, so the people will know, like, okay, cool, this guy like to take drugs, like, you know, let me take drugs because this guy's taking drugs, like. But you saying like, oh, this guy is, you know, taking this type of like healthy herbs or some shit like that, like, you know, for him, like, you know, to tap into a different world, like, you know. Why? Like, so that shit like made me like really think, like, you know, all this, like, you know, and it's not wrong, like, you know, if it's like a community, like, you know, where you did not ever, you know, has any saying into it, your signature is not even on it, like, you know, but you take it and make it your own, like you were part of like a struggle or something like that, like, you know, and things are just getting worse for you all the time, like, you know. But you see like the other community, like, you know, who created it, like, you know, and live in certain different way, like, you know, you want to live that also like that, but you still like not in a position for you to make certain like decision or anything like that. That's not for you. Why? Why? You know? Like you know, so you can see, like, you know, when I was talking about the Christianity part, like, you know, and kudos for the people who looks like the person that actually on the picture, like, you know, they maybe see the world that way. And in my conversation having with those two parties, like, you know, and the son actually tells me, you know, after me asking, like, you know, where those black folks coming from, like, you know, from Adam and Eve, like, you know. And later on it goes to me like, yeah, but we Christians, like, you know, we see the world, like, you know, as hell, you know. And we have to go through the Jesus guy, like, you know, for us to go to heaven, like, you know. So I was like, oh. So it's almost like the same thing, like, as spirituality, like, you know. So the people, like, you know, who knows, like there's no other way, you know, let me just smoke my way out of here. And then you have the Christianity telling me about, like, you know, they see the world as like hell, you know, so they want to skip the whole experience of like living here, you know, and they want to go to heaven, like, you know. And then you have the Islamic world, like, you know, so their God, like, put, like, you know, in their world, like, you know, there's always going to be problems, like, you know, so you have to, you know, be military, like, so anybody who comes, like, to, anybody who doesn't read or is not Islamic, like, got to go. It's like, it's awesome, yeah. But in the beginning of it, like, everybody used to, consume certain things, like, for them to be okay. People were more healthier, like, But once you change, like, your way of, like, consuming things, like, like, things that get a little bit more, like, difficult, like. So you're going against, like, you're going against, like, your genetics, like, and things will go, like, very bad for you all the time. All the time. So, So that was like my take, like, me and him, like, having this conversation, like, it's actually we actually did a pod, like, about it, like, because we only, like, went in there, like, to talk about, like, racism, like, because it's such a big thing in Ireland, like, everybody's talking about, like, this racism thing, but I don't think, like, it's a big thing, like, I just think, like, it's emotional reaction, like, like, if you walk around the street, like, and somebody calls your name, like, you feel a reaction, like, so you have a choice, like, either to go out there and punch the guy in the face, or maybe just, like, leave it, because, you heard it so many times, like, you just feel like, nah, this is not really, like, something that I gotta even, like, do it, like, and for some people it's new, like, so they kind of have to react, like, in a certain way, like, I gotta do something, like, I gotta talk about it, like, I gotta go out and let people know, like, that this group of people are not really treating me right, like, it's boring, like, so that's the reason why, like, and then from then on, like, then we start talking about, like, food also, what to consume, and then he puts me on, like, on this guy, like, Kevin Gabe. And Kevin Gabe was talking about, like, like, his spiritual journey, like, and yeah, like, but the brother looks, he's saying all this semen retention, and like, then he went to ayahuasca, once I just hear that ayahuasca part, like, I'm like, yeah, nigga, like, brother on some drugs, like, taking drugs, man, and then he also confessed, like, he's like, yeah, man, like, I trying to do that also, like, and I'm like, how did you do it, like, then he said, like, yeah, I had to take some few medicinal things, like, for me to experience, like, that type of vibe, like, like I told you, like, because you can't just, like, stay at home and then just, like, people see gonna knock into your door, like, you gotta pay the rent, like, so you're gonna get letters and shit, like, you can just, like, move away and come back, and then, what, like, what? So that was a bit, like, crazy, like, for me. And the school was, like, for people, like, who love their, the religion, like, for them to continue doing, school, like, but just don't say it, like, in a way, like, to make people, like, really, like, scared, like, if you don't do certain things, like, you're gonna, like, this is wrong, and then the spiritual thing, like, like, yeah. They need to stop with all the spirituality things, man. And I was like listening to many of them, like, you know, spirituality people, like, you know, there's always talking about like spirituality as a healing mechanism, like, you know. No. They just like to take drugs, that's it, you know. Just be honest, like, you know, just like I like the mushrooms, man. I like the weeds, like, you know, I like them cocaine, like, I like the whatever, like it is, like, you know. But just don't put it like into it like a spirituality type of vibe, like, you know. And you don't even know like what spirituality is, like, you know. And I don't even know like what spirituality is, like, you know. And the spirituality people, you always see them, they're always like, you know, like mad, like, you know. And you never see them happy. They're always mad, like, you know, about certain things. Like, you never see them happy, like, you know, always like, you know, you need to do this when you do, like, yeah, it's getting crazy out here. But yeah, man, this is another video. You know, there was food in there, obviously, of course, you know, but, you know, as I said, like, you know, like teaching and about like food and all of, like, it's gonna come later on. I'm just wanna, you know, yeah, I'm just gonna get rid of like this goofy shit, like, you know, this like consuming certain like things, like for you to be like, I don't know, like, I don't know why that's why people trying to do, like, you know. But I know for a fact, like, you know, once you take like certain substance, you know, you're trying to escape certain like problems, like, you know. So we just trying to understand that part, like, you know, and then later on, like, you know, yeah, then we're gonna start getting into the nitty gritty, like, you know, the food that is gonna help you to get rid of certain things, and, you know, because there's a way, you know, there's a way to like live good, like, you know, just to feel good, like, you know, you don't have to be like rich, like, or like, you know, it's like, you just have to feel good, like, you know, feeling good, like, you know, is that's what people are looking for nowadays, like, you know, to feel good, like, to feel certain things, like, you know, to feel like, you know, feel alive, like, you know, to feel like, yes, I'm alive, like, you know, I feel like, yeah, man. I feel like having babies, I feel like having like kids, I feel like having a family, you know? Yeah, you know? So that's what people are looking for, like, you know? But once you start taking these things, like, you know, you're not really gonna look for those things no more, like, you know? You know, it's gonna numb you down, like, you know, so you're just gonna look for like goofy shit, like, you know, like drugs, you know. Yeah.